Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Welcome back to another episode of Keiser Voices, and we are excited to have with us today Dr. Robert Keiser, the Vice-Chancellor of the Graduate School. Welcome, Dr. Keiser.
Thank you, Mrs. Cordner. Thank you, Ms. Lovo, for the opportunity.
So we were hoping to really dive in and talk to you about Keiser's international expansion and where that's going to take us in the future. Can you share with us a little bit about what is already happening with Keiser University's international expansion?
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. One that I spent a lot of time operationally working on. So this year, actually in 2024, Keiser University has expanded to 8 different countries with 13 different physical locations. We'll see if I can get the list right. It is Spain, it is Bolivia, it is Ecuador, it is Peru, it is Sri Lanka, it is Indonesia, it is India, and Vietnam. So those are our new campus locations. Ultimately, what we are doing is we're offering either associate or bachelor programming at those locations. And we have academic control and oversight. In the future, we hope to expand the program offering to include master's and doctoral programs, but at the time being, we are navigating the SACS or accreditation process for approval. But we may see that in 2025, 2026. Ultimately, what we hope to see from this new partnership and new international expansion is the increase in the diversity of our student body and faculty and staff. We also hope to have exchange opportunities, student exchange from the international locations to both the Nicaragua and flagship residential campuses, but maybe even our adult serving campuses, say in Jacksonville or in Tampa or in Miami. And also exchange back. We want students at our American locations to study abroad in these various locations. That'll be an opportunity. We hope to also do faculty exchange, teaching opportunities internationally, also sharing of research and development opportunities across borders. But ultimately, we believe that international expansion is important to the institutional vision and our goals. And as well, we think it builds more mutual understanding at a global level. So if Keiser University can play a small part in creating a more peaceful and more understanding world of each other, we want to be a part of that.
Oh, that's amazing. And you said something there at the end that I want to kind of address a little bit more. You said about creating a mutual understanding. So we know that in each country, culture is very different. We're talking about very different views on academics, education, what is more important, what maybe there's one area of study that should really be more focused on. How does the university maintain its academic quality in these different regions?
It's a great question. It is something that is on the top of our minds because we want to make sure that we preserve the integrity of the shield. And the way you do that, and we've been really successful over our history since 77 in navigating, operating in different geographic locations. For those in the audience who may not know, we have 18 physical campuses in Florida. And then we have campuses in Nicaragua, also in China, that predate these international campuses. So overall, we have about, prior to the international expansion, about 20 or 22 campuses, depending on how you count them, because we also have the Patrick Space Force Base as well. But then we added these 13 locations in 8 different countries. So ultimately, you build an organizational structure that can support it. What we have what we call associate vice chancellors or regionals, who their responsibility is providing best practice, training, and oversight to the various campuses within the region that they're assigned. You also have great leadership on the ground, and that's really what I think makes Keiser University excellent and unique is our human capital. I do believe, and obviously I'm biased, but I think the people who work for this institution are the best, bar none. They care the most about the student. They care most about upskilling them and helping them have better futures. And that's what we're looking for, regardless of our geography, are educators who care. And so when you're prospecting talent, that's what we're looking for. And once you get the right talent on the ground, and you have the right oversight structure, and you have the right culture of collaboration, then you can pretty much overcome any challenge. And it is complex. We're working in different jurisdictions legally, politically, economically. You talked about cross cultural competency. Just the way you interact is different in different countries. So there is a lot for us to learn. There is a lot for us to navigate. But building that organizational structure and having the right culture of working and the ethos of working, I think will help overcome those challenges.
Looking at long-term goals for the institution, I know you talked about opportunities for exchange, and even taking to these different countries different educational opportunities they didn't have before. What do you hope that as an institution we have to gain from these, maybe on this side of it, here in the US? What can we take away from that or hope to learn from these connections and expansions?
Sure. Another good question. So I'm going to give a kudos to you and to Adriana prompting me well, I guess, in the questions. It is something that is important, obviously, that is mutually beneficial. So one, I do believe diversity is a strength. I think it's important to surround yourself with divergent thinkers. I think it's important to surround yourself with people who have different lived experiences and different backgrounds. I think that creates a more holistic educational experience. So for the Chinese student, the Vietnamese student, Sri Lankan, the Ecuadorian, the Bolivian student who comes to study with, say, in West Palm Beach at our flagship campus, that flagship student's going to benefit from meeting someone with a completely different lived experience, from someone whose global worldview may be different than theirs based on where they grew up and the education experience they had before. At the end of the day, our student, our American student, will be able to determine based on their own preconceived notions, based on their own education and their lived experience, what they believe and, whether they buy in or they don't. But at the end of the day, exposure is important. And I think also it builds rapport and mutual understanding. I think one of the reasons that people discriminate against others is because of not only exposure, but people rely on biases and prejudices when they are not exposed and acclimated to a diverse group. It really, I believe, what is amazing is discrimination dissipates when you meet individuals from different walks of life who overcome those biases and those prejudices that you may have heard before. So I think it also creates a more global thinking, a more inclusive environment, but also a more inclusive mindset. I think the students, who maybe come from Alabama or from New York or California, maybe they've never met someone from Vietnam. And I'm not saying that the prejudices are negative, they could be positive as well. But at the end of the day, once you start meeting these people and you start putting them in a melting pot, then mutual understanding naturally occurs, and you build a community of global scholars. So I think that is one of the big benefits, is becoming a global institution, an institution that provides not only opportunities, like I said, for study abroad for the students domestically, and maybe even in the future teaching opportunities at these various institutions should they want to become a practitioner or a scholar in higher education. But just in general, every day when they're sitting in the classroom, they're going to be inundated with very diverse opinions and diverse lived experiences.
So you've had an opportunity to visit some, not all of the international campuses, but some of the international campuses. What have you enjoyed about those different visits?
First and foremost, the people, the individuals who are the educators at these various campuses, they get it. And when I mean they get it, they understand that the student is the focus of education. Not all the externalities, not research, not grants, not even, whatever self-promotion there is for higher ed, or even, a money-making motive. What the focus of education should be is upskilling students, helping them become better practitioners and scholars, and helping them have a better life post-graduation. And intrinsically, the large majority of these educators, all is probably a word I would never use, but the large majority of these educators understand that. and they're in it for the right reasons, which is making better futures for students. But then additionally, I love seeing the cultural differences. So for example, what I think is really interesting when we do orientation in China for our psychology program, they say, well, this is the best of the Western education system, and we're going to mix that with what our Eastern knowledge is, and we're going to create a new breed of psychology. I think that's pretty interesting and pretty fabulous. There's a different take on education because it's not just an American-centric view of education. So navigating those cultural differences, I find very exciting. I think it's really neat to see these countries across the globe embracing global humanistic ideals and then embedding that into their curriculum. And it really is interesting to see the world become a smaller place. And that's what you see, whether you're in Vietnam. I mean, these people speak perfect English. They're, again, their mindset is about supporting the student, but then they have a different lived experience. And so we can't teach the MBA or the business administration program exactly the same in Vietnam because their employers expect different things. So I think that's the coolest thing is actually seeing those cultural differences and seeing how that augments our educational delivery, because many of those practices, I think we're going to be able to bring them back to America and they become best practices for us.
That's amazing. That sounds really interesting. And we will actually be talking to the Vice Chancellor, the Associate Vice Chancellor of the Shanghai campus later this month as well. So we're really looking forward now that you gave us a little sneak peek of what she might touch upon in talking about the Shanghai campus. But as we look to the future, where do you see Keiser global reach going? Is there further expansion maybe on the horizon? Do you see it evolving and it's already the way it stands?
I believe it would probably be unrealistic to say that we won't expand. I think our history as an institution has demonstrated that we are absolutely culturally in belief of progression and expansion. Considering we started with one student and about 2,500 square feet, this institution looks very different than in 1977. So I think the momentum will carry forward. We continue to grow, which is something we're very proud of. And we're going to continue to seek new opportunities to make American higher education accessible to the global masses. That is part of our mission. It is in our strategic directions that we report to SACS is international expansion. So yes, I do believe that we will see ourselves grow into new markets. Some are more likely than others. For example, I think that based on our demographic in Florida, Brazil is a particularly interesting market. And the reason is that we have a large contingency of Portuguese students and Portuguese speakers who live in Florida. Orlando, for example, has an enormous Portuguese and Brazilian population. And so I think that there's opportunities for collaboration with universities there, maybe even having a brick and mortar campus. Who knows? Maybe we'll even teach in Portuguese in the near future. I could see that considering we already teach in Spanish and Mandarin. So why not Portuguese? So I think that is a possibility. And look, I think that there's going to be possibilities that occur organically from the expansion. I think that if we locate in Bolivia as we have, well, then maybe the partnering country will, or the neighboring country will say, well, it's really cool what Bolivia is doing with American higher education. Maybe we can replicate that and reach out to Keiser. So I definitely think there's an expansion in the future. I would tell you, Mexico, Brazil, probably, I would say, at least in my consideration, the most likely. But that doesn't mean that's exactly how we're going to do it. I can tell you in 23, we did not expect to expand to these 8 countries that we did in 2024. So I cannot tell you like Nostradamus could what the future holds. But I do believe there is growth in the future.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Keiser, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about Keiser University's international expansion, even where maybe we might end up in the future. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And I really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that way you can stay up to date with our other interesting conversation as we continue the conversation on international education.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.